Hello and welcome to another comedian's interview for my blog and podcast, Arich Comic Life. My name is Richard Gill and my blog describes my experiences of watching over 1,000 stand-up comedians over the last 47 years. I'm delighted to welcome my guest today, Mr. Peter Merre. Yay!
Hello, thank you. Thank you so much, Richard. Found your work.
Hello, mate. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Nice to see you again.
Thank you, and thanks so much for doing this.
Absolute pleasure.
I hope.
It's an honour.
I hope.
I've seen some of the names you've already interviewed, and I'm just, thrilled to be on that list.
Well, that's very, very kind of you, and it's wonderful to have you as a guest. The interview is going to last about 45 minutes to an hour, and we're going to go right back to the start. If you can tell me, please, how did you become a comedian in the first place?
Well, how did I become a comedian? I was always a fan of comedy on television.
Yeah.
Sitcoms, sketch shows. Like growing up in the 80s, like 40 Tower reruns, The Young Ones, Spitting Image, and even like the more classic Morecambe and Wise, Tommy Cooper. Two Ronnies. So like it's sort of like all genres really. Like the change of like the mainstream became a bit more alternative, and the clubs. So I didn't really start going to comedy until like the late 90s.
Right.
And I did like a radio broadcasting course, and from part of the broadcasting course, we went and saw some BBC radio comedy being recorded at the Pleasance in London. At that point, it was BBC Radio 2. And from there, I started going to live comedy. Although I say, I started that. I'd been to see like Dave Allen in the West End.
Oh, I'm jealous.
And Punt and Dennis in the West End. So, but then I'd start. So I went to watch like people that I'd seen on the television do stand up. But then when I started going to gigs like at specialized comedy venues like the Comedy Store and the Comedy Cafe, close to where I lived,
Yeah.
and then Lee Hurst opened a club in East London where I live, and Jongleurs opened in East London where I live. So I started seeing how people, like it wasn't just superstars in theatres, it was comedy clubs and it's personalised comedy clubs. And then I discovered like Time Out magazine and open mics, and I started going to watch open mics, and I love this, I really like this. And I had an evening job at the time, and I thought, I can't. It's easy to go and watch comedy as soon as I finish work, but how do I get into this, And I was looking for like a comedy course, and I found one in the back of Time Out at the time. This is before the internet. This is a long time ago. I found like one in the back of Time Out, and it was weekends, so it didn't affect my evening job. So
Right.
I'd done the comedy course, done the showcase, and then didn't do comedy for a very long time after that. But eventually kept writing, kept going to watch comedy, mixing with comedians. I had friends from the course. I worked at my friend's comedy club from the course, done the door for him Friday nights,
Right.
met lots of people, kept the bug, and eventually I just had to start performing again, and that was the only way. I mean, I was always writing and submitting stuff, and I got on the BBC, very, very small amount. But in the end, it's like, if I'm going to get anywhere, I've got to perform, And
So-
I faced my fears and went and done it.
So I can remember getting Time Out every week. I came down to London from Carlisle in 1992, and I used to look in Time Out every week and go to the Comedy Store or Jongleurs or something like that. And there used to be telephone numbers for the comedians to ring.
Yeah.
To get the bookings. And is this what you initially did, or was it through the comedy course that you actually got up on stage?
Yeah, it was from the course. The weekend course was, I think it's more like 6 weeks now, but at the
Right.
time it was 8 weeks.
Right.
And we'd go in and they'd give us like subjects to do, maybe like a little bit of homework, go home and write some material, or do like bonding classes in the course where we all fall over and catch each other.
Yeah.
So on the 8th week, we the night before, the Saturday night before the Sunday was like the last day of the course. On the Saturday night, there was like 12 comics, all invited their friends, sold out room, 200 people in Camden on a Saturday night, and we all done our first gig. I mean, some of the guys were already out on the circuit doing bits and pieces, but I've been going to watch loads of comedy, and I was a regular at one or two different clubs in Islington, and talking to them about it. And and we used to go to gigs, and my friends would say, you're better than these guys. Some of these guys, with open mic, the level. You get the really great ones, and then the not so great ones. So it's like, well, why don't you do it? Like, and I had the evening job. I was always putting it off. So I'd done the course, done the showcase, but then because I had the evening job, I never went back to performing straight away. And then eventually, 10 years later, I was like, okay, I'm going to do it now.
So So the comedy course was around 1990. Is that right?
1990, 2000 actually. Yeah.
2000, right? Because one of the reasons why I do the blog is to support any comedian. I'm full on with supporting new and upcoming acts, and friends of mine who have just started out, I've been their friend who goes along in the audience and sees the act over and over and over again until they perfect it. And it's wonderful watching them develop. And a friend of mine springs to mind who only had the 5 minutes, and I would laugh in the specific places for him, for the rest of the audience to try and do it. But it's all about experience. That's what I tell all the other comedians that have been on here. The more you get, the better a comedian you are, whether you have a good or bad gig. Do you agree with that?
I do. It's all about stage time. There's very few comedians that will, it's a very rare thing where you hear about someone winning a big competition, like for new acts, so you think you're funny on their 7th gig. It's very rare, but it does happen. But normally there'll be like a final of a new act competition, and there'll be like 12 acts in the final, and I'll know like 7 or 8 of them because I've gigged with them, 3 or 4 times in the previous month. And it's like, rooting for this guy, rooting for that guy, and it's so deserved and so welcome, because these guys have been out there applying their working it, making sure it works. Working, like it might be just a little word that needs tweaking and that, and you can talk about comedy and the theory of comedy until you're blue in the face, but until you're getting up and doing it, it's the only way. It's the best way to learn. It's the best way to learn.
So there you are. You're doing your job, and you've done your comedy course, and you want to be a comedian. So you're 10 years later, and you start to go to comedy clubs and get in that way, and you do your 5 minutes, do you, or is that just above a pub and you bring friends along? How did you get into the rhythm of gigging regularly?
Yeah, well, I say I kept my eye in. I was writing material, like topical material, submitting to BBC, and then a program called Newsjack, and then working the door of my friend's comedy club. So I was always like networking and meeting people, and I think someone invited me along to. So originally when I started, there wasn't any bringer gigs as we know of them, and Time Out was, and there was no internet. Like literally in 2000, there was no internet to speak of, And then when I got started, Time Out had more or less finished their comedy section, and it was all internet based, and you could just book things online. So. But yeah, a friend told me about a lovely gig in Brixton, in Stockwell, sorry, I should say, Cavendish Arms. I went along there and done a spot. Didn't perform for 2 years, and then two more years later started. Literally, like I said, right, I'm gonna go out and gig every night of the week, and I've done like more gigs in that month than I'd done in like the previous 10 years, and it's like, and then I got the bug. Then I can't stop, basically. Yeah.
I had a go years ago. I wanted to get it off my chest that I wanted to be a stand-up comedian, and the promoter said to me, "We've got a gong show for you, which is for it's for an old people's gong show thing, which couldn't have been worse. And I did this 5 minute script. I had this 5 minute script, and he said, right, he said, if you go on and they gong you off, so I went on, and the first line I said to them was, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. There was 3 people in the audience. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, because it was an afternoon show. People think I look like Eddie the Eagle Edwards, but I can't see the resemblance myself. And of course I do. I thought it's a fail-safe to get in. And some old bloke at the back just went, fuck off, and cut me off. And the promoter went, have another go. So I went back again, same thing happened, and I said, I don't know about actually being on stage. Never say never, but I will support you, the comedians, forevermore in the audience. It is daunting, but I can imagine that when it goes well, it's the most brilliant thing, because that's why I go and support it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Yeah. And it took me a long time to kind of that mentality where, like, I'm enjoying the writing, not so much the performing. But once I started doing it properly and doing it 15, 17 times in the first month, treating it like a job, not a job, a day job, but treating it like a job, treating it like it's my life, it's what I do, I belong there. And then I got there, I got there, and now I love it. I can't imagine it took me so long, and it I didn't enjoy the performing side of it, Unbelievable.
So when you're on stage, what do you like to talk about?
Yeah, I do a lot of topical stuff. That's my sort of social media topical comedian. I do, but I talk about myself and relationships and surreal. I do one-liners. I do Stoko stuff. So a bit of everything. I like to do everything. I love crowd work as an MC. I love absolutely everything. Don't go too dirty, too rude, but I'm sure as the more I develop, I'll go, save that for the late night crowds and the Edinburgh shows maybe. I try to do a bit of everything,
What's interesting is that you are doing everything, because you've got specific storytellers, you've got great pun comedians, and if you're trying to do the whole range, that's fantastic. That's really, really good. Can you tell me about your writing process for a routine or a show? Do you indeed have a writing process? How do you go about thinking from an idea to putting it on the stage?
So, in the old days, you'd buy a notebook, and as soon as you think of something, you write it down, and then maybe at the end of the week, you'd go and form that into a routine where the formulaic. Nowadays, it's more a case of I write it on the phone notes, and then process it over. But that would be the right process. Obviously, I do a lot of topical material. So the setup would come from reading the newspapers, reading the emails from the newspapers, reading the news websites. I've already got half the joke, as it were. I've got the setup because I'm making jokes about real life events, and then I'm developing the punchline, what I think is funny, subjective.
Good man.
Everything, but a lot of notebooks. I've got tons of my flat is a mess, and tried to limit what you can see on the screen is the cleanest part of the flat. Basically, my flat is like a warehouse for comedy news.
Good
basically.
Man. That sounds fascinating. Are you one of these people that writes things down on your hand when you're on stage?
Yes, absolutely. Bullet points. I feel that I know the jokes, but if so when I was new, obviously I needed the reminders. I knew the jokes. I just needed to know the order that everything went in, and which joke followed which one. That one leads into that one, that leads into that one, and there's the big finish. Sort of thing. Yeah, I definitely write on my hand. 4 or 5 bullet points. If it's a 5 to 10 minute set. When you do a longer set, maybe you kind of maybe you need another system. I don't know.
It's-
I've heard stuff about like people using like memory tests, like and certain objects around the room. But I find that just as difficult. I mean, it works because these guys are like world memory champions. You know, I've seen them at the Excel Centre on the same bill as Donald Trump and Seb Coe and Tony Robbins. It definitely works, but it's something like an extra headache for me. But you know, maybe as I do more hour shows, that's how I'll do it. Maybe, but you know, I feel that again, repetition is the way to learn stuff. Is you know, like there was a system that I recommended in one of the books that I had was like get a grid, like a calendar, 1 to 20, do it in front of the mirror, do your routine in front of the mirror, and then cross it off grid number 1 and then grid number 2. And then when you've got 20, it should be stuck in there. You know, That's a good way for new acts. You know, when you're adding new material, I suppose, you know, like or learning a completely new routine, that would probably be a good way. But if you're just adding 1 or 2 jokes every time, you know, you think of something on the tube as you on the way over to the gig, or you know something's happened, you can add it in. You know,
that's an interesting thought actually, because at the time of recording, we've just had this year's Comic Relief Appeal, and 1 year I, other than the blog, the most creative thing I ever did was write a play and appear in it with my friend. For Comic Relief. We raised a lot of money. We raised over $2,000 for it. The play was called The Applicant, and it's basically about me coming down from Carlisle to London, and I've no job. I've got a successful girlfriend who has a very good job, and it's all about me having interviews for jobs to try and get the perfect job. And it was basically monologue with me sitting in a waiting room and then being interviewed by my friend who played all the different interviewers. So, of course, I'd never written a monologue in my life before, and the first time we did it live, I forgot the monologue. So it was just like a rabbit in headlights, and I'm thinking, is that the same for comedians? Because with it being a written piece, a theatrical piece that I did, the comedians, I'm guessing, can always banter with an audience till they remember if they've strayed at all. Is that how you play it, or?
I suppose, yeah. I suppose, like, if you, as a comedian, if you memorised every single word, and you delivered it like a wood, like it might be too wooden. Whereas, you know, you do want to look at a member of the audience and get their reaction and, you know, change the wording a little bit. You know, you're not learning a script like, you know, you're doing EastEnders or Holby or whatever. I don't know why I said Holby. Coronation Street. Is Holby still going? I don't know.
I think,
I don't want to BBC. Just have I got this for you? So, yeah, I've completely gone off script now. Off where I've lost my track. So, yeah.
Whether writing for a theatrical piece was different to writing for stand-up.
Yeah, I think basically you want a little bit of leeway where you can, you know, change the wording or change, you know, like not the meaning, but, you know, like maybe react to something the audience, you know, you might get an audience member say something when you're halfway through it, and when you're new, that's really off-putting, you know. But the more experienced comic can handle it, and then deal with it, and then go back to it, you know.
I think as well, learning it word for word stops you from being natural on stage.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I have listened to a few of your other ones, and I remember Jacob Pauli, who's a good friend, said that he does a lot of his writing on stage, you know, and he'll process things, and during the lockdowns he couldn't do that. He'd done his radio show for the BBC where he'd never performed it to an audience, and he'd done it on Zoom and he couldn't see them. So that's like you get inspiration on stage, and you think of something literally and you say it, you know. Your brain, it's almost like your brain's two different sort of beings, like off stage and on stage, and it becomes, it's like I must record this set because something could happen. And as you know, with live comedy compared to Zoom comedy, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, is like anything can happen at live comedy. You know,
that's the thing. You're in the moment, aren't you?
And absolutely. That's what's wonderful about it. That's the love of it. You know.
You are a regular compere at many different comedy gigs. Describe the differences between comparing and delivering a comic routine.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I love comparing MCing. It gives me more flexibility. You know, I do the crowd work, and I think I'm good at that. I enjoy the mix of talking to different people and learning, you know, their jobs and their lifestyles, and you know, and if I ask them the right question, in many ways, if I get the right question, they'll say something, and I've got a relevant joke to that bit, and I'll make it look natural, and then the whole room will go, "Oh, that was good, that was funny." And then I'll set the room up nicely to bring the first act on, or you know, the next act on, and the whole kind of sometimes, you know, the whole gig can depend on the compere being running it right, running it correctly. You know, not just on stage, but you know, the lighting and the door and the everything. So I enjoy doing the compere work, but also I can bring on an act, and the act might talk about their relationship, their girlfriend, you know, that sort of thing. And then I can come on, and I've got some relationship material, and I'll do 3 or 4 jokes, bang, bang, bang. Again, it looks like, you know, not trying to
seamless,
top them, but trying to make it relevant. The audience, that was clever. That was good. And, he talked about this, and he's talking about this, and then I'll bring the next act on. You know, and I only have to do a minute or 2 minutes, reset the room, and bring the next act on. So I love that. Whereas if I'm doing the set, and it's like, you know, I've had a busy week and I haven't rehearsed it properly enough, maybe. I've got to remember 10 minutes. I've got to remember, you know, all the bullet points as on the hand. And I might go off course. I might forget a little bit, you know. I might, I forgot the Adele bit, or that sort of thing. Whereas, which I did before Christmas. I've done a really good in a gig. I've done a really good gig. I've got like 5 round of applause during the set. I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
And I come off stage. I was talking to someone about something we're going to talk about in a minute about Zoom gigs, and I said, I forgot to do a complete bit, you know. So yeah, when you're on stage, it's like doing your set, your routine, like not the MC bit. You've got to do every bit. You've got to nail it almost, you know. Whereas as the MC, it's like, I forgot to do that bit. I'll do it next time, you know. I'll call back, you know.
Would you say that comparing is easier than doing a routine or a set?
I find it easier. Yeah. You know.
Why do you think that is?
For the reasons I've said, like, you know, if I forget something, I can go back and mention it later on. I can bounce off the act. If the act's talking about Trump, I can do 4 or 5 Trump jokes. If the act's talking about relationships, I can do 4 or 5 relationship jokes.
Sure.
If the act's talking about, the act's doing one-liners, I can throw a few one-liners in. If the act mentions word games, I'll do a Sudoku joke. You know, it's almost like, you know, I'm the host of the most.
So they're pointing you, they're helping you out. Everybody's helping everybody out. That's interesting. To date, what has been your best and worst gig? I can't imagine you ever having a bad gig, but should
have been there at the beginning. I've had some gigs where early on in my career, my comeback, because I was friendly with so many comedians, through doing the work in the door, being friends with them, doing like radio stuff with them, I got invited to some gigs where possibly I wouldn't have got on otherwise. And just to be the politest way of doing it. It's not who you know. It's not what you know, so you know. And there was one particular gig in Surrey on a Saturday night. I was like in single-digit figures in terms of gigs. I'd done them all that week. It was the month where I'd done like 17 gigs in the month, 15 in 16 days at one point.
Wow.
And I went on and mentioned the David Cameron with the pig incident, and I did, and the responses I got were not so great. And afterwards, I'm thinking, well, you know, if they're Tories, I don't care. If they didn't like me, I don't care. But it was difficult at the time on stage. It was a good learning process. And, you know, having the bad gigs, you learn more from the bad gigs.
Exactly.
So, early on, picking it was like a sports club, and it was a fundraiser. And Patrick, who was like running the gig, said to me like, "Yeah, do your sports material," because he knows I'm a big football fan, sports fan. And because I'd been doing the different routine in the clubs, I did the other routine and not the sports stuff and the Cameron stuff, and got a different response from it than I was expecting. But great learning process. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, brilliant. How do you cope with any nerves before you go on stage? Do you get nervous at all?
I do. Yeah, when I'm running gigs like MCing and got to do the lights and the door and the music and everything, it's almost like you don't get time to be nervous.
Right.
But when you're starting out and I found it really difficult at the gig in Stockwell where they don't give you the running order in advance and you're just sitting there shaking because you're new as it is, and then they're gonna. It's almost like they're picking the names out of the hat.
Yeah.
And I did ask him once if I could go on at a specific spot after the interval rather than because I was so new and because although it's a gig for new acts, some of those acts would have been going for 2 years and they're just going there to try out material.
Yeah.
Or it's their local gig, so they'll go to that gig because it's local and that. And so I find that. But I do I go to I read motivational books and self-help books and all that. So I just tell myself I'm amazing and fantastic and
well, you are. There's no doubt.
Looking and sexy and everything. And it's and then when I'm on stage, it's and if someone's it's heckles who are you to heckle me?
Exactly.
I do have a big ego, basically.
That's exactly what I look at when I go to a comedy show. We're not here to hear the hecklers, we're here to see the comedians. And that's the point of it. That's the whole point. We've touched on this slightly before. How do you remember all your routines? Do you have pointers in your head as you're going along to guide you through the routine?
I think, again, like touching on before, I'll have the bullet points. I know the jokes, but I need the prompts for the jokes. Trump leads into Johnson, leads into Brexit, leads into COVID, leads into Russia, that sort of thing. Hopefully I'll get the order right. I might miss one of those and think, hopefully the audience didn't understood it, that I missed out COVID, but they still got it, I hope. Because they don't know the routine in advance. I know the routine in advance, that's one before Christmas when I forgot the Adele joke. Nobody else knew, but then afterwards, I was talking to some friends who'd seen me before, and it's talking about Zoom gigs, and it's I've done this Adele joke on Zoom, and then I realised I hadn't done it that night, so
oh dear.
Right on your hand, maybe again 4 or 5 prompts on a notebook, and you don't like to refer to notes on stage, but people understand it's a new material night sometimes, or hey, I'm just trying a new bit, and you've had all the big acts coming on, and I'm just going to try a new bit, I'm like the unpaid actor of the night or whatever, or the new material night. You've got your money's worth from the real acts. I'm just going to do I'm going to do some workshop stuff on stage now.
Sure, yeah, no, it's fine.
People get that. People live comedy. People understand that, don't they?
It's all experience.
I've seen Stuart Lee take notes on stage and that, and it's this is what we're paying for. You don't get that on television.
Exactly.
We're in the room. If something happens tonight, only the 30 people in this room will know about it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Stuart Lee or whoever.
Let's move on to Edinburgh. I am very fortunate to be able to go to the Edinburgh Fringe every year. It's my holiday. I go up there for a week and I see about 50 shows. And I when I come back to London, I need another holiday because I'm shattered, my liver's battered and everything like that. But I have the time of my life up there. It's the most incredible thing because if you're into the arts or whatever. Can you tell me what your first Edinburgh festival was like?
Well, I used to go as a punter, as an audience member like yourself,
yeah.
like weekends, bank holiday weekends, the end of August, that bank holiday end of August weekend. And then like I moved abroad for a few years, and then I came back, got the performing bug again. So the first time I went, it wasn't as a solo show. It was working for somebody, doing the door for his show, his solo show, flyer in for his solo show, then booking, texting the acts, telling them what time to arrive for the compilation show, flyer in the compilation show, doing the door for the compilation show, doing the bucket for the compilation show. So I really learned a lot that year from working with him, meeting lots of new acts, like new faces, putting names to faces, that sort of thing, faces to names. And then that was obviously August. When I came back to London for September that year, I started running my own nights, emceeing my own nights on a Tuesday night, open mics at a venue in Covent Garden that had comedy 7 nights a week. And I obviously had one of the quieter nights because I was new to doing that sort of thing. And from there, I grew into becoming an MC, as we've discussed before. So the Edinburgh was a great preparation for that. That particular Edinburgh, at the compilation show, he didn't put me on until the last night as a spot. I didn't give me a fire spot until the last night. And I was so, so annoyed.
It'll happen. It'll happen.
But I'm still friends with him. I still do workshops with him. He still gives me advice. We go out for dinner, Christmas, a group of us. He's a great friend. He gives me great advice. That was the only thing. I was not getting more stage time. But it was a great learning process. And also, he would have the Sundays off.
Yeah.
And we ended up, my housemates, my flatmates at that Edinburgh, we ended up taking the Sundays and, taking turns in emceeing it and doing spots. So we got an extra hour that we printed up our own. We wasn't in the brochure or nothing, but we got, we all got like 4 or 5 of us in the flat got a bit of extra stage time. So
again, more experience.
That was a really good experience.
Yeah.
So it was a good experience, maybe not so much stage time, but learning, networking, meeting people, learning the process of Edinburgh, like every day, getting up and doing it like a job, So the second Edinburgh that I went back to and done, we done a split show, 3 of us doing 20 minutes each, talking about our backgrounds, we had the theme where we were all kind of like East London, 3 of us, and like I'm the white guy, we had a black guy and a brown guy, Asian guy, and that was like the theme, black, white and brown. But one of the guys went home very early in the run for personal reasons, and we were left with a choice of, should we bring in another guy to replace him, a person to replace him, or should we have more stage time for ourselves? So we've done a bit of both.
Yeah.
Obviously, again, this is like 2 years on from my first performance in Edinburgh, my first time in Edinburgh. So we knew lots of people because we ran gigs in London.
Yeah.
So we knew lots of people. So we gave stage time to people that we liked, and we knew that would make it a good show for the audience, and get a better bucket basically.
Will you be going up this year at all in 2022 or?
I will be. You said this recording is not going to go out.
This is not going to go out until about October, November time. So it will have happened. But yes.
So I mean, I'm doing Brighton Fringe in 2022. Obviously, there's no point promoting it because we're going. This interview is going out later.
Yeah.
But I'm doing Brighton Fringe, and I'm waiting to hear on my room for Edinburgh as we speak, as we record. But I'm hoping to do it. I'm hoping sort of thing. By the time this interview goes out, I'm hoping that I'll have
you'll have had a packed
regular,
year.
like YouTube, like weekly regular YouTube thing that will go out, and like social media presence, and my website will be up to date by then. So and that sort of like the social media clicks hopefully will lead people to come to my solo shows. So I'm planning to do Edinburgh this year, and basically go every year with a topical show is my plan, and do all the other festivals as well.
Good man.
For whenever anyone's watching this, you follow my social medias, check my website, and find out if there's a festival like near you. And I mean, I'm not famous enough or got enough profile to tour properly at the moment, but that's the plan for a couple of years. And I know you're gonna ask again, like, where do you see yourself in a couple of years, or what's the plan? That is the plan, is to build up, whether it's people who see me in the clubs on a split bill, or whether they see me on social media doing a little bit of topical material, is to follow me like that, and and then come and see me when I'm in their town, basically, or see me at the major festivals, you know, like you would do, you know. I'm hoping that I can offer something a little bit different from the straight stand-up people. When I'm doing, like, you know, the whole set of topical material, you know, and it's like, you know, stuff that we watch on the telly, like when they're talking about the news and, you know, comedy news shows and that, you know, radio shows.
That sounds brilliant. And the reason I asked the question was that I love to go to festivals, and I'm trying to go to more every year. I've just come back from Leicester, which was at the start of the year, which was fantastic this year. I'm going to Brighton, I'm going to Hastings, and I'm going to Edinburgh. And the more experience of watching comedy, the better, because through all the pandemic and everything, everybody needs to get back into it, and it seems to be opening up. To date, what's been your comedy highlight?
I've been on TalkSport doing like as a guest, talking about the news and the quirky stuff in the news. Been on Soccer AM. I've written for BBC Radio, like the topical shows.
Good man.
So yeah, that's the sort of things, and I love doing the Edinburgh Fringe, and like you was asking about the best and worst gigs. Like the best gig I had was probably at the Edinburgh Fringe, a late night crowd, and because it's almost midnight, 11:30, something like that, 11:30 p.m. Everybody's drunk. You can't deliver a slick cutting edge routine about the news. It's like you've literally got to go with your crowd work, and it just happened that they was like a group from Essex, and I just started insulting them and just done the whole room for like half an hour. And we had two other acts, but I just wanted to do the whole hour.
This is mine.
Give them their bus fare, and you go get yourself a coffee, and go get yourself a McDonald's, and I'll do the rest of the show, guys. But obviously I didn't do that. I was too professional and good friends. So we brought the other acts on. I done like half an hour, just roasted the crowd. It was brilliant. I loved it. And then that's probably my highlights. And I've started doing like hosting pub quizzes for a friend who's got a company. We spoke the same football team, Leighton Orient. He runs a quiz company all over the country. He hires comedians all over the country, and I've started doing them. And there was one quiz again just before Christmas where it was more like, because like with Christmas 2021, it was like COVID, Omicron, and that, and so it was just before Omicron was about to hit, and we was worried that people wanted to get out and enjoy themselves, have their Christmas parties, their unofficial Christmas parties, and they'd been drinking since 5 o'clock, and I started the quiz at like 7:30, 8 o'clock. They was like, some of the teams left because the quiz took like an hour longer than usual, and they were. I was telling them not to use their phones because people like use their phones at a pub quiz to cheat and all that sort of thing. I'm telling them, and the girls going, I'm just texting a boy and all that, and I just treated it like an Edinburgh gig. Like I was like a late night gig. I'm telling them, listen, he'll put your phone down. Make the boy keen. He'll either text you back or he won't. And left the comic timing with the or you won't. And it was, for me, it just reminded, because we hadn't been to Edinburgh for 2 years. I hadn't been to Edinburgh for 2 years because of COVID, 2020, 2021. That sort of pub quiz became like an Edinburgh gig for me, like
Brilliant.
a late night fringe gig. And it's like, I think this is the best quiz I've ever hosted.
Good man, that's brilliant.
Just reminded me of Edinburgh, So
that is fantastic.
I love that gig.
I wanted to ask you many things because I used to go all the time to the Now Show and the News Quiz and News Jack, and so you're writing for radio, and I also wanted to thank you for interviewing me on the radio show that you did last year. How did you get into radio writing and radio DJing?
Well, it was almost like the other way around. I did the radio production course, radio broadcasting and production course. So we've done a bit of everything: presenting, producing, writing for radio. was called a HNC at the time, back in Stratford, East London.
Yeah.
And from there, I got into comedy, watching radio comedy.
Yeah.
And then I got into performing comedy, as I explained to you earlier.
Yeah.
So, and then so BBC, obviously the news quiz, the Now Show, the BBC Radio 4 have got like a lot of established comedy platforms, rosters and that, but they've also got a roster of experienced acts that they use, week in, week out. So they brought out the Newsjack for the new writers, and I started submitting to that from day one,
right,
2009. Even before I was performing regularly, I was submitting because the pressure's off. I don't have to go on stage and deliver the material. I just have to think of a topical joke and write it in, send it in. The deadline was always, I think at the beginning it was like 4 o'clock on the Tuesday.
Right.
Later on they made that 12 o'clock on the Tuesday, lunchtime on the Tuesday, which meant I had to get up earlier. So I just submitted. I started submitting through that really, and I got onto Newsjack through that. I was in the audience because I live in London. The recordings are in London. I was in the audience the first time my joke was ever read out. Justin Edwards read it out, and I was like nudged my mate because I actually printed off my material, like the 6 jokes that you send in, or it might be 9 at that point. 3 monologue jokes, 3 breaking news jokes, and 3 vox pop jokes. Was the strategy. They obviously changed it quite a bit, the writing structure on Newsjack throughout the years, which they've just axed it as well, the new BBC. But I think that might be down to the government.
Yeah.
Not liking the critique of them.
Yeah.
But they've changed over the years. So I printed them out, showed it to my mate in the foyer before we went to our seats in the BBC Theatre, and then. When they read my joke out, I nudged him. It's like, oh, it's my joke. It's my joke. So I don't remember any more of the recording other than they read my joke out in the monologue of 4 minutes. And I haven't gigged with Justin Edwards, but I gigged with his wife Lucy, and I was doing the door actually, but I was doing the emceeing as well because my friend was at Glastonbury.
Yeah.
And I said to her, oh yeah, I want to talk to you about your husband. And she goes, oh no, what's he done now? And I said, well, he read out my first ever BBC credit, so I owe him a beer, I didn't do the script, but anyway, yeah.
I was once recording of the Now Show.
Yeah.
And they have a bit where at the start of it, they give you a question. You'll know this. They give you a question where all the funniest answers are read out at the end of the show. And the guest was John Culshaw, and the question was, what's the most stupid thing that's happened to you at school? And I said, I once fell asleep in the 6th form and some bastard Tipp-Ex'd my glasses. And when I woke up, I thought I'd died. And I thought, nobody's going to read that out. Well, John Culshaw read it out in the style of Alan Bennett.
Oh, my God.
It was genius. And I thought, what a good use of the audience to get them involved at the record. And the writer must have thought that's a great idea, So, So, wonderful stuff. And how did you branch off into DJing then?
Well, I started doing the radio production.
So it was all through the
production.
Right, fine.
Got into comedy from that, you know. And it didn't really work for any big stations, but my friend started doing the local one.
Sure.
And we done the radio broadcasting course together. So, and he used to help me at the comedy nights. He would do the DJing, music in the intervals, and he said to me, "Do you want to come in and be the sidekick on the radio show? You phone up your funny friends, interview them, your funny people." And because he was worried at the beginning that we wouldn't get any phone calls from. Right. He's like a psychic medium,
Right.
And obviously on the radio, it's just for entertainment. It's not. It's not legal. It's not legal advice, basically. So it's for entertainment. But people would ring up with their problems or their, can you see if there's anyone on the other side for me? So, and I don't know if I believe it or not, but I'm there as the sidekick for the comedy interviews. People I interviewed yourself. I normally interview comedians, but obviously I know that you're a super fan. I'm aware of your blog. I'm aware of your podcast. So
well, thank you. I was delighted and honoured to be part of it. It was really great. Let's move on to online gigs. We've all had a horrible, awful time the last couple of years or so. It's been awful. Have you done many online gigs? What's your view of them? Do you think, and what do you think the future of comedy is going to be?
I was apprehensive of them at first. I was on the fence. I wasn't in a rush to go out and perform them.
Yeah.
I wasn't performing a lot at the time anyway. In March 2020, I've been running a gig for 2.5 years. I've been running 4 venues at one point.
Yeah.
Over 2.5 years from that first spell in Edinburgh, coming back and running gigs, learning my trade, and I just needed a break, so I took a little break. And then the pandemic happened, and I got an enforced break. So I wasn't in a rush to do anything on Zoom, but I got friends invited me to come on and just muck about. Really, the first few wasn't even gigs for audience; it was just having a chat, and it was the catching up. Everything, the pubs had closed, and you couldn't go and meet your friends in the parks and that. So at first it was just chatting to people on Zoom as friends, and then it's like, okay, so. We got all this stuff is happening in the world, COVID. Like, I'm a topical comedian. I'm writing jokes about COVID, about how the government are handling it or how the people are handling it. So it's like, okay, I've got this new material, and I put on all the weight that Adele lost and all that sort of thing when she come out. So I found that once I was doing Zoom gigs every week, basically. Sometimes doing 3 gigs a week, doing like a lunchtime gig, was doing an evening gig. Sometimes it was for the same audience every week, so they got to know me. They got to be, we got to be friends, and they'll come and see me at real life gigs now because they've seen me every week for a year, 18 months, online. So it's definitely worth doing it. I know there were acts that were saying, "Oh, I'm not going to do them," and then 3 to 6 months down the line, they're like going on the comedy forum. Online and saying, can anyone give me a gig? I'm going to try Zoom gigs after 6 months. So as a comedian, you've got to try everything. There were gigs, as there were gigs in car parks, there were gigs in cars and gardens, and we done gigs in caravan parks, socially distanced, because we preparing for future gigs, like because we had some charity gigs when everything reopened. Fundraising gigs, so we needed the stage time. So I'm going off the subject, but Zoom gigs. I done material on Zoom gigs, but when things reopened back in July 2020, August 2020, I knew that they worked because I'd seen people laughing at them on Zoom. So that was a great start for me because there were acts that hadn't touched Zoom that were coming in and were really like raw, they hadn't gigged for 6 months almost, but because I'd been doing gigs, I know jokes that did work and jokes that didn't work or that might work on stage because I'd been doing them on Zoom,
My view of it was I couldn't have got by the pandemic without an online gig, but the first time that it happened, the first week or so, I used to go to the Happy Mondays with Sean James. He did one. I used to go to Jarlath Regan's Irish Abroad one, and I used to go to the Always Be Comedy Online one. And initially, they didn't have any audio on them. It was just a silent audience. So here I was laughing at 4 walls. I thought I was going to be taken away. And of course, they opened it up to the front row, was what they call it. And it gave not only the comedians something to hear, but it also got the comedians time in the jokes, and they were getting better and better and better at it. Having said all that, for me, you can't beat live. I was so pleased when everything opened up. I love to go out on a Saturday night with a few beers. I'm going out tonight to Headliners. Meet a friend of mine, have a few beers, go in, sit down. As I said before, it's of the moment. You're live, so anything can happen, and you're willing them to do well. But it was such a good grounding, and I think online gigs will continue. You know, because they're very
Yeah.
good. They're very good for people who can't get to comedy shows and all this. You know, it is very wide. So it's a fascinating thing because they'd found an extension to the medium, and it worked. You know, they did have specific comedians. Some of them didn't want to know, but I think they regretted if they could just get on there and chat.
Yeah.
You know, you were getting some sort of feedback. Who are your favourite comedians, past and present?
Past and present. Well, Bob Monkhouse for me,
Brilliant.
is a genius.
Yeah.
And I know you've spoken about like acts that you have seen, haven't seen, and the ones that got away.
Yeah.
I mean, I never saw him live, but like, you know,
I would have loved to if he was in my ones that got away.
Yeah.
I love Bob Monkhouse. I
Yeah.
think he's a great gag teller. He's so funny. Yeah.
I mean, from growing up and like seeing him presenting quiz shows on television and like, oh, I'm doing quizzes now, but unconnected. But from seeing him do them and then realizing that he's actually a stand-up comedian, like say growing up, I'd see Dave Allen and Punt and Dennis doing TV shows and then go and see them live in West End and thinking, oh, this is something that you can do live. You know, this is a genre.
Yeah.
It doesn't begin on television. You know.
Yeah.
So learning that Bob Monkhouse was a stand-up comedian and like not a quiz host, and you know the encyclopedia knowledge of his brain and
it was extraordinary. He had a gag for anything, didn't he? He was brilliant, and he had all these extraordinary
there was one routine. I think it was on Saturday Night BBC, and it was
Yeah.
probably like about 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
It wasn't like late night rude stuff, naughty stuff.
Yeah.
It was. He would ask the audience for two subjects, A to B. It was almost like improv, and he would go from. He would start with the banana tree, and then he would end up at the giraffe, and he would go through with like a routine. And you know, I mean, you go to a lot of TV shows, you see them recorded. Maybe you know it wasn't as improv as we'd like to imagine it was, but at the same time, he's encyclopedia.
Oh, he was brilliant.
I'd love to have seen him live.
My favourite Bob Monkhouse joke is my fans were walking down the road the other day, ladies and gentlemen, and reminded me I was from Kent. I think that's what they said. Genius! It's all wordplay. So did you watch a lot of TV growing up then?
Yeah, basically, yes. I said earlier, like 40 Towers,
Yeah.
and just like the reruns. I just think that's the best sitcom ever.
Yeah.
Basil John Cleese,
Without a
genius.
doubt.
Although not a stand-up, but you know,
Yeah.
just a comedy actor, comedy all-rounder. You know, basically genius. Although I have seen him do a live show. You know, it wasn't stand-up though. It was more chatting.
Right.
He was being interviewed. John Cleese. I love John Cleese. George Carlin. The first time I went to America.
Brilliant.
I bought like a George Carlin calendar, which was like a joke a day.
He's brilliant.
Again, this is pre-internet. And then after that, it's like, okay. Then the internet came along, and like Amazon came along, and it's like, okay, I've got to get this calendar that I bought, Brain Droppings, George Carlin Brain Droppings, is an actual book. This is like his first book, and it's just like one-liners and faults and and quirky stuff. And you know, a lot of that shaped, you know, the way I was writing in my early days. You know, those sort of quirky ideas, thinking outside the box, and like
brilliant.
Little quirky bits and that. So George Carlin. So like, and of modern day comedians that I've lucky enough to see live, met, chatted with, gigged with one of them. Tim Vine for like one-liners, brilliant.
Absolutely love him.
First saw him on telly in '96 on BBC One.
He's still got the record, isn't he, for the most in an hour? It's extraordinary.
Yeah, just amazing.
Just bang,
amazing.
bang. He's hilarious.
Yeah, he's just a genius what he does. I'm lucky enough to gig with Tim at a charity gig.
Brilliant.
I was nowhere near should have been on that bill, but there you go.
There you were, my friend.
Harry Hill.
Oh, yeah.
Love the surreal stuff. Again, started watching him on television. Going to see him live, and then just love watching Harry.
What's wonderful about Harry Hill is that he's gone back into the clubs and he's doing it all now. He still holds the best one-liner ever. When I first saw him 30 odd years ago, he walked out onto the stage and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry I'm late. I had to have a testicle brought down," and everybody burst out laughing. And then just on the beat, he said, "From Derby." And it was just, and when I met him, I told him that. I said, "Oh, I still do that this day." He's a lovely bloke, and he's helped a lot of comedians as well.
Yeah.
Wonderful. You know, great choices. Anybody else?
Yeah, political, like Mark Thomas. Just absolutely love Mark Thomas.
Yeah.
I've had I should have got the book out off the shelf. I had material on his radio show.
Yeah.
As an audience member, as a rather than a paid contributor. And then I lived abroad for 2 years, and then I came back, and I'm sitting in the office, and I realised that there was a book of this radio show, which was also a tour show, the Manifesto. Mark Thomas, the Manifesto.
Yeah.
And I realised that my idea was in the book. And I thought, oh, okay. And then I should have known it. And then I realised that my idea was on the back page of the book.
Wow.
And not just on the back page, it was the top one on the back page. It's like, wow, unbelievable. So
That's brilliant.
I subsequently met Mark a couple of years later at a gig, and I told him what I've just told you now. Oh, okay.
He's one of the best. He's so
I love Mark.
He's so good because whatever argument he makes sense. It's clear to understand, and it's also very funny because he can easily extract the humour out of any situation. He's an extraordinary comic. When you're on a bill of comedians or comparing, do you stay and watch all the comedians on the bill?
I would say 9 times out of 10 I would stay for the bill. If I'm lucky enough to be offered double up, as we call it, where I can go on early. For example, I can go on early in Covent Garden, and I can go on late. So, for example, I can open in Covent Garden, and I can close in East London. If I can do 2 gigs, I'll absolutely do 2 gigs because we love stage time. And if we can leave the house once and get 2 gigs for the price of one travel card, or one tank of petrol, or bicycle, as it might be. It will be in the future because no one will be able to afford petrol in the future. If I can get 2 gigs for the price of one, I'll absolutely do that. But 9 times out of 10, I would rather stay and watch the gig and see the other acts and learn, maybe see some new faces that I haven't seen before.
Brilliant.
In my role as a promoter of small gigs, get acts that I book for the future. But yeah, other than that, I mean, sometimes you have to get the last train home. So like, if I'm in London, I'm doing a gig in Brighton, and I've got to get the last train, I might have to miss an act or 2. But 9 times out of 10, I would like to stay and watch, have a drink at the bar afterwards with some of the acts, some of the audience, if they're up for that sort of thing. Just because it's not just about being on stage. It's about everything else. Comedy's my life, really. That's
you and me both, my friend. What a hobby! What a hobby! What a positive interest. What's not to love?
Absolutely.
I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I really have enjoyed this chatting to you. It's been wonderful. You've been a great guest. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we go? Where can people find you on social media? Have you got any gigs or writing or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, social media is Topical Comedian on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Facebook, there might be like a gap, but Twitter, Instagram, TikTok will be all one word, Topical Comedian, as in the news, not tropical on a beach. Although one day, who knows? One day.
You never know.
But if it goes well. Social media like YouTube will be thing. If this interview is not going out straight away, I'm pretty sure my website will be up and running by the time this goes out. And I'll be.
We'll have all sorts of links on it anyway with the interview. I always put a little bit of text on it, so I'll get all the links to everybody.
I'll be hoping to do like a weekly YouTube of the news and email subscribers, all that sort of thing. I'll be doing all that. So go to the website or go to my social media, and that will link to everything else, basically. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I, for one, am going to come and see you very soon, gigging in Covent Garden. And
Yes.
yes, definitely. And I want to thank you so much for your time. You've, as I say, been a fantastic guest, and all the very best to you.
Thanks, Richard.
You
Take care,
take
mate.
care. All the best. Thank you.